Most people show up to a meeting and they spend the first 15 minutes trying to figure out why the meeting exists. Why have I been invited? What's this all about? And we're not fully contributing. And then we end up doing other things because the meetings aren't run well.
What is strategic conversation?
For me, anything that a strategic conversation is really a conversation that's bigger picture and typically a bit longer term. So it's stepping out of the immediacy and looking at it either from like a 10,000 foot view or looking into the future. One of the things that I recommend to people, and it's the thing that they resist the most that has the biggest impact. But you're right, putting time in your calendar for
Melissa, I am so excited to jump into our conversation about strategic conversations and helping kind of pull this bit apart, because I don't think people do this well. I don't think people understand this. And I believe that when people get better at strategic conversations, things move faster. You can gain more momentum in the work that you are doing. So maybe, Melissa, you could just kind of dive in and tell me, what is strategic conversation?
Yeah, it's such a great way to sort of just nail down into what we're talking about. So I often look at there are many ways we can have a conversation. And a lot of us walk around with a lot of tactical conversations. We're looking for details. What time is that happening? What are the specifics of something? Where are we going? So we often have a lot of tactical conversations, and especially in our workplace. We can have relational conversations, sort of conversations to connect with another person in lots of different ways. We can have conversations that are about influence, trying to get somebody to do something that we want them to do. We can have reflective conversations, whether that's conversations that are reflective on our own experience of something for self-awareness or reflecting back on a project. We can have conversations that are developmental, helping us or others to move towards something and grow. But I think we often overlook the strategic conversations because I don't think people really understand what it is. So I love that we're starting with this. And often in the workplace, what we think of a strategic conversation is around a budget conversation or a strategic planning conversation. And those are included, but those are very specific around a specific set of tools you're using. For me, anything that a strategic conversation is really a conversation that's bigger picture and typically a bit longer term. So it's stepping out of the immediacy and looking at it either from like a 10,000 foot view or looking into the future. It can be looking, what does someone 2 levels up from me care about? So I have a broader view of something within the organization. It's something interdepartmental or across groups and people. It can be trends in our industry or outside the industry. So it's really just looking at something broader than just what we're dealing with in that moment. And there's often a purpose element to it too. Like, what's the purpose or what's important about it?
Yeah. So can you give me a great example so that we can make it, as much as you said,
Yeah,
this is about strategic, but make it more tactile so people can have like a sense of feeling as
absolutely.
the, yeah.
So I often go to questions because questions drive conversation. And one of my favorite questions that I ask either out loud or to myself is, what would success look like at the end of this? So that's a great way to frame something within it. Like maybe what would success look like 2 years from now? Let's say we're talking about a project. So thinking about that gives us a frame for being strategic about the direction we're going, what it looks like at the end, and all the sort of pieces that end to that. But you could even ask that same question, what would success look like, even about a conversation? If I'm about to talk with you, what would success look like coming out of that conversation? Do I want you to make a decision? Do I want us to be aligned on something? Do I want us to have the same experience? So it can be about a meeting. Imagine if all the meetings that people had, we had a conversation around what would success look like at the end of this meeting? Do we want people to come to alignment on something through conversation? Do we want to delve deep into something? So it's really that question, whether it's an actual verbal question or something reflective, can help frame a strategic conversation. Another question. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I was gonna say when you talked about meetings, I think that's a space that's so easy for people to grasp
Yeah.
onto. Like, what is the outcome that we want at this meeting? And I typically am like, what is the decision we want to make? What is the question we need to answer? Or what is the action that needs to be taken as a result of it? So people truly understand. So when you are talking about strategy, you can actually, strategic conversations, you can apply it to multiple different events or activities.
Yeah, and a meeting is a great one. I think meetings are one of the areas that if we got them better would really make one of the biggest impacts on our day-to-day work lives. And if people had that conversation, what would success look like at the end of this meeting? What's the purpose of the meeting? Purpose is another strategic question or strategic conversation. Is the purpose of the meeting to make a decision? Is the purpose of the meeting? Sometimes people say to me, well, the purpose of the meeting is to share information. Well, it's to share information for the sake of what? What are you doing with that information when you leave the meeting? It's not only to share the information, it's for some reason, but often we're not thinking to that next step. So the purpose of the meeting, like you said, what decisions do we want to make? Sometimes a meeting is to come to alignment on something. It's not even to make a decision, or it's to make sure I got a chance to hear your point of view. Sometimes a meeting is to build relationship. And sometimes we're in a meeting that has a stated purpose of one thing and the actual real purpose is something else, but people haven't surfaced that.
So how do you get people to start to rethink, to change the way they had these conversations? I really love the meeting topic because we all spend so much time
Yeah.
in meetings, right? There's so many.
36 hours a week on average.
Exactly, right? In a 40-hour week, 36 hours a
Yeah.
week is spent in meetings. And that's costing companies millions and millions of dollars every month just in meetings. So if they don't have this strategy, if they're not good at having strategic conversation, how does a leader start to reframe their mindset around this for this process?
Well, I always like really simple tools. So if you have 2 or 3 questions that you ask yourself or ask the organizer before every meeting, it starts to create a frame. So what would success look like? What's the purpose? What's my role in the meeting? All the people that I'm inviting, what's the value I'm expecting them to contribute? So there are only 2 or 3 questions we have to ask to really put a good frame on it. And that's often when I'm coaching people, that's often what I give them. Ask those 3 questions. What would success be? What's the purpose? And what's the value I want each member to contribute, including myself? It depends on if you're running the meeting or not. But even if you're not running the meeting, you should still be thinking of this so that you can contribute more effectively.
Yeah, and even question whether you should be at the meeting.
That's the biggest one. And should I be at the meeting? It should be at the meeting for the full amount of time. What's my value to come? What do I need to prepare? Most people show up to a meeting and they spend the first 15 minutes trying to figure out why the meeting exists. Why have I been invited? What's this all about? And we're not fully contributing. And then we end up doing other things because the meetings aren't run well. And it just leads to a big circle of inefficiency.
It does. It does. And meetings are such an easy thing to pick on, I think, for this type of topic, because we're all so aware of them. And what I believe too is everybody knows that they're like, "Oh, I have to go to another meeting." And so, but none of us actually take that progress and do something about it. One of the things that I'm curious to know, often, especially in the project management world, we have the same meetings over and over again, right? Like every week we're going to have this meeting. And I think we may think about it at the first time we run the meeting, but then the meeting expands and it explodes and we add more people to it. What is your thought about how we get into a habit of doing that kind of review before before we move into the next meeting, or start to think about questioning it every time?
Yeah. I do think people should question it every time because it doesn't take that long. It only takes really a couple minutes and you're saving so much effort going in knowing. So sometimes people say, well, we have an agenda and that's sort of the bare minimum, but an agenda is really to keep you on track with what you've decided already. But people often don't think about the decision piece before they make the agenda or to revisit it. So I do think it makes sense to revisit it every time. Just say, okay, what would success? Because maybe tomorrow's regular meeting has half the number of people there. Or maybe we have someone from head office coming in to watch. Or maybe we have something that's happened in the project that we want to talk about. So just having that little check-in, what would success be? So all of that stuff, for me, the biggest thing about being strategic is being intentional. And it's being intentional about everything, intentional about bigger picture things, intentional about those strategic plans that we mentioned at the beginning, but intentional about how you use your time, how you're approaching a conversation, how you're approaching somebody else, how you want to show up. there's so many things we can be intentional about. And even just that little bit of reflection is a strategic approach to a conversation.
I so strongly value the intention before any conversation. Essentially, you and I met beforehand, right, to talk about what are we going to have in this conversation? What is it that we want to share with people? And I think people don't even take the time to reflect on any conversation before they have it. They may have rehearsed something in their mind, especially if they're frustrated or a difficult conversation. But often I feel we miss thinking about, okay, because of this conversation, what do I want somebody to think, do, or feel because of this conversation? So if we can switch gears from meetings, because I think we could beat that
Spend a
one.
whole episode on that one.
We could do a whole episode on. I was reflecting on strategic conversations and looks at in two ways. Which one would you like to start with first? The strategy of the company or the strategy of the organization or the strategy of a person individually?
I'm okay with either way, but maybe we'll start with the company. I think people are more comfortable with not themselves first and themselves first. So yeah, going into a new year is a great time. There's no magic about a new year. For some people, it's a fiscal year end. So that has a natural close to a year. But it is a calendar indication of us to just stop and reflect. Some people do, well, first, most strategic planning for the new year happens prior to that if you have a January 1st start date. But it's really, there's many pieces to it. What do I want? What would success look like for the next year? Maybe you have a 5-year look at that. Maybe you're looking at the next 6 months, but it's some intention around not just the goals you want to accomplish, although that is part of it. But like you were talking about, you're talking about how do I want to feel? How do I want to be? How do I want to show up? Well, it's the same for companies too. Do we have some financial targets? Do we have market targets? Do we want to be seen as in a certain way in the industry? Do we want to enter a new industry? So how do we want to be seen to the world? How do we want to operate internally? Because those are different things. One's external facing, one's internal facing. It could be related to resource planning related to those targets. So there are some natural things around budgets and finances that we tend to look at. But it's also a piece about, I'm going to add another piece to this. So in the book that I wrote about being intentional and strategic, I talk about imagining. And we often don't talk about imagining in business, but it's in the best case scenario, who can I imagine we're going to be? This could be personal or it could be for a business. And that probably isn't going to be in a year, but it's some future version. So if you're an organization that wants to be number one in your field in a certain geography, or you want to be seen as somebody committed to social impact in your industry, whatever it is, you start with the biggest version of what you collectively want to imagine for yourselves, and then you work backwards to be more realistic. But most people start with the realism and they don't let themselves imagine to be something bigger. And we look at some of the big organizations in the world that have changed things. It's because they dared to, like Apple's a great example.
Yeah, I was thinking.
They dared to imagine something that didn't exist yet. They dared to imagine to be a kind of organization that didn't exist yet. It wasn't because they knew how to do it when they imagined it. And then they let that be the leader and broke it back down into what does that mean for the next 2 years? What does that mean for the next year? What does that mean for the next 6 months? And things don't always turn out exactly how we want them when we imagine something, but it gives us a guidepost, or what Tim Cook calls your North Star. It gives you a place to look that's bigger, more ambitious, more innovative, whatever it is, whether technologically or like human based, but it gives us something to strive for. Then we work backwards. What does that mean for the next year? What does it mean for whatever other time frame we're looking at?
And I think that really aligns with engineering. Like, I think the reason a lot of people go into engineering and especially run bigger projects is because they're imagining the future that doesn't exist. And if we don't take that time to really sit and reflect on that and think that through, we just stay in the same old. And you mentioned Apple, and what was coming up for me was when Steve Jobs came back, right? He was like, okay, we have too many products. We have too many pieces to this puzzle. But he could vision seeing like a very successful company by shrinking the platform and saying, okay, we only need like a phone, a computer, and an iPad, and we don't need all kinds of other widgets to go with it. But he also reimagined music,
Yeah,
right? Like getting
completely. Yeah.
right, like completely
What is
reimagined,
that? 1,000 songs in your pocket was sort of the tagline
like
for that. Yeah.
exactly. And so I think the great thing is, and that's what makes work fun, is when we can reimagine a future that we currently don't have and then have that vision strategy conversation on how to get it. I love that.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be as ambitious as Apple. Like sometimes we use these examples that we all know, and people say, "Oh, but we're not an Apple, we're this." Maybe you're imagining being number one in your industry on a certain product that you have, or maybe you're imagining being a more user-friendly version of something or something like that. It can be very specific.
Can I share something that came to me? So you recently, I saw a post about somebody who's using a technology to get plastics out of the ocean,
Yes.
right? So tell me more about that from a strategy standpoint and how, even as individuals in a company or creating this new field, could do something like
Yeah,
that.
well, some of so that particular I don't know how that particular person came to the place where they made that technology, but it's imagining an easier way to take plastics out of the ocean. And it's not knowing how to do it yet. It's imagining there must be an easier way to do it. And then they work backwards to say, how do we do this? Oh, well, magnets are one way we could explore. How do we get something that's magnetic, that's plastic? So, like, I don't know their thought process that got to that, but it's the imagine that this is an issue that we want to solve as a society. What's another way of looking at it? So I think we have sometimes we're driven by a desire to change something or to fix something, and other times we're driven by something simpler, like the 1,000 songs in your pocket, not knowing at all how that's all going to play out. Like we take that for granted now, but back then we didn't have digital music. So but I think that what we've lost sometimes is the ability to dream about what's possible without worrying about how to get there. The
Yes.
reality will come. We're not going to just stay in the dream stage, but the dream stage is the step at the beginning. And then say, oh, if we do want to be the number one firm in North America that does something, like, okay, we're number 7 right now. Let's look at a plan to get there. But we have to have the desire in the first place.
Yes.
And it's also like it engages people because they want to be part of something purpose-based. They want to be part of something bigger than themselves. And if you read anything around some of the early days of computing, those people were working crazy hours doing things that
Yes.
nobody even knew that they were going to, like, with big machines, all these different things, but they were driven by this desire to see something realized from their efforts. So you can often bring in pride and engagement to an organization when you have a vision. Again, it could be technological, it could be company based, it could be how you treat your employees. You want to be the number one firm for employee engagement or whatever it is that you want. But it does create some pride and engagement with an organization. There are lots of other offshoots of it, not just the actual accomplishment.
Of the goal.
Right.
When you were talking, one of the things that also came up for me is that when you have that vision, there were two things. One is it brings a level of excitement, right? Like you get excited, and those people who are working like crazy hours, it's because they are excited about what it is that they're creating, what it
That's right.
is that they are doing. And so often, like we can get into this like doldrum of like just that same old routine over and over again. The other thing that I heard you say, and I was talking to a group of engineers this morning, and we're all doing a bunch of leadership work together. But one of the things is taking time in your schedule to plan time to sit and just allow your mind to create, allow your mind to reflect and experience that. And I think that's really important to be able to have good strategic conversations, because often I see us just go from one thing to the next thing to the next thing to the next thing. And we aren't taking that time to really just sit and reflect and pause before we have that strategic conversation?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that I recommend to people, and it's the thing that they resist the most that has the biggest impact. I always said if I were someone helping you lose weight, and I said there are two main strategies, like, eat fewer calories and move your body. And I was like, okay, but what else do you have? I don't want to do that. That's kind of the thing that I get from people who, when I tell them this, but you're right, putting time in your calendar for thinking, strategizing, planning, creating, imagining. And it can look different for different people depending on your role and your organization, but it can't be. So for me, the opposite of intentional is reactive. And it doesn't mean what it means is reacting to different things. It means reacting to deadlines, reacting to an email, reacting to a message, reacting to a request. That's where we spend most of our days, reacting to stuff around us. The intention part is I'm going to put some time in my calendar to think about the next 6 months, to think about my team, to think about the resources I need, to think about this project that I'm planning, to think about what I want. If we're higher up in the organization, it might be, this is what I imagine for our firm or for our organization, or even just for our own personal leadership. Here's what I want over the next 2 or 3 years. And it doesn't have to be a lot of time. And a lot of times when I'm giving people this assignment, they think it's additional time. How can I do this? I already have 36 hours a week of meetings. I'm not going to have time to do this. What it does is it replaces other time. So in the early days, when you first start doing it, it might feel like you have a slightly increase in your calendar because you haven't shifted things yet. But most of the time, what you're doing is something that you would do 2 months from now, or 3 months from now, or 2 weeks from now. So you're almost just bringing it forward to do it in a more intentional way. So it's not from a reactive or a firefighting kind of way. And what people spend their time on is very different. But what can I delegate? What's this meeting? What can I, like, how do I want to approach this meeting? Just like I talked about going into, I have 5 meetings in the next day or so about this one thing. How do I want to show up? What impact do I want to have? What value do I want to bring? What can I contribute that moves the meeting forward? What would success be at the end of it? That is all intentional and strategic time planning. And you need to have some time in your calendar to do that, because otherwise we're just answering emails and running from thing to thing.
You said, right? People will like resist because they're like, I have too many meetings. But it is amazing when an emergency or something urgent has to happen, how we can get rid of all those meetings on our
Yeah.
calendars to focus on this. And I think people need to take that same attitude, is that, okay, I need to put this into my calendar. I I don't know where I read this or heard this. I think there's a book by a professor who focuses on meetings. Like all he does is research on meetings. And one of the things he says is, for every hour you book in your calendar for someone else, book an hour for yourself.
I love that.
To do your own work, to do your own. And so you have the ability to shift around. Like if somebody's like, I need time, can we do it in this slot? That's fine. But don't allow yourself your full day to get blocked with other people's requests, other people's needs, and really spend that time. So I believe when we actually plan it, when we put it in this engineering group meeting, one of the guys was playing with AI to be like, how do I strategically put these meetings into my calendar so that it looks like a purposeful meeting? Actually book over it. So the term he ended up was calling it the CAS meeting. And he's like, it's the critical alignment session. This is a critical alignment session with myself, and really time to think and reflect on it. And I love that. It was like a really great, fun way of him going, okay, I'm going to take some ownership of time for me to think strategically, to really allow that time.
Yeah. Can I add something else? Because what I often get when people start doing it. So I'll give you an experience myself. So before I became a coach, I was an executive. And I remember being told, oh, you need to put strategic time in your calendar for thinking and blah, blah, blah. So I had it in my calendar as a recurring meeting, and I never did it. I always did other things. And so one day I'm like, okay, I'm going to do it today. So I sit down and I'm like, what am I supposed to be thinking about? Like, I had no idea what I was supposed to use that time for. And I get that often with my clients too. So I often say, if you have a to-do list, if that's how you run your life, have 2 different lists, or maybe 3. But they have the to-dos, which typically are deadline driven. They're usually a bit more urgent. They're usually date driven. and have a strategic list, which tends to have things on it that aren't finished. Like if I want to have a recurring thought around what kind of feedback I want to give my employees or the people that report to me, that's not ever done. So it doesn't really end up on the to-do list until it's a performance conversation at the time of year that your organization has those. But if you had that as a rolling thing, most of the things on the strategic list are rolling things. So it's like, okay, every once a month, I want to really think about my team, think about culture, think about feedback, think about, so you spend, that's a rolling item on your list. It's never done. It doesn't get checked off. It's not deadline driven. So another thing that could be on that list is forward planning around a big initiative that you're doing, whether that's a project or something for the firm, or maybe it's a business development opportunity, but it's just doing some planning, thinking, and maybe you're attaching resources to that or timelines to that. And it's really just giving yourself to think and plan it out. Other things that it could be around your own career and your own leadership. There are so many things that can go on the list that we can keep going through as we go. It could be for the meetings I'm going to have next week. How do I want to show up to these meetings next week? What's important? What would success look like? All of those things. So it's the list of stuff that doesn't often get checked off. So I like to have two separate lists for that.
One of the things we were talking about, there's a couple of things that we were talking about this morning. I love how this aligns with a conversation that I had this morning with a group of engineers, a group of people who are in the project world. And we talked about this idea that great ideas show up to us in the shower.
Yeah.
Right? Like when we are doing something and so one of the things we talked about is sometimes when you're trying to get into these thinking modes, like physically get out of the office and go for a walk and do it while you're walking and moving in something that doesn't require you to think. I love the idea of having like a list of what are some of the different topics that I need, but often it could be just as simple as I'm writing an email to my team and I've like sat there, or a report, and I've sat there and I've like focusing and drilling and drilling and drilling, trying to meet that schedule to try and get it done. And what often happens, and this is what we were talking about this morning, is that when you walk away, when you step away and give yourself 20 minutes to breathe and then go back to it, all of a sudden the ideas come clearer. The concept comes clearer. You actually have had time to reflect on it. And so when our schedule is so back to back and we feel that we need to hardwire ourselves into doing it, and like we're not being productive, that we can get ourselves into this mindset of, as opposed to, it is productive to take time and just be like, okay, I'm just going to think about this email and allow yourself to relax into it. Yeah.
I love what you're saying. And there are two pieces to that you're talking to. We can't shove our strategic time between crazy other things, like, because it's different energy. And you're pointing to why that creativity doesn't come to us in that moment. If we're in a adrenaline mode, like, let's get this, then this is the time to knock out 5 emails, or time to do something else if you have a few minutes. But it's not the time to say, oh, this spaciousness that I need to strategic plan. And that's actually partly why people don't like to do it as well. There's not the same dopamine hit that you get from thinking through a project for the next 6 months as you do from finishing something and sending it to a client or sending it to your boss or whatever. So there's an energy piece of what you get. Like, you have to be willing to shift gears to have a different type of experience, and you need that different type of experience to do, like, there's both pieces of that energy.
Yes. Earlier this week, actually, I was listening to a podcast with Dr. Joe Dispenza, who I absolutely love. And one of the things he was talking about is our different brain states. Like, so there's low beta, medium beta, high beta, and then below that, there's alpha. And what he was saying is that our natural state where we are most creative is alpha and low beta. When we can get there, our brain is in coherence. We're able to actually, our mind opens up and allows us to think of other ideas and be creative and be curious. Middle beta is when you're on an interview like this, and it's not like a stressful one where you're like, okay, I know what kind of the questions are and what we're going to talk about, and we're going to have this chat. So you're a little more alert in that conversation. And then high beta is where you're like focused, like you are like and you're not necessarily seeing the other options that are available to solve the solution from a strategy standpoint. And so one of the things he was talking about, and I was sharing this morning, is that if you can realize that your goal is actually to take your brain from high beta into low beta or alpha, you can actually be more creative. And in that space, you can find the answers that you were looking for that when you are really narrow focused, you don't actually see. And I
I
think
love
that's
that.
really important when you're trying to actually change or think about these strategic conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you have to put enough space to be able to, unless you're really good at shifting those, I don't know
Yeah.
what he calls them, levels. But so, for instance, when I work with executives or leaders, I often say pick, like we usually talk about what day of the week, but often they pick Friday morning to do this because sometimes their demands are lesser in terms of meetings, their demands might be lesser from clients, and it gives them a space. So there's something about choosing a time that isn't as crazy that allows people to sink into that better. But I also believe that there's a predictability element too. So if I know that every Friday morning I have this kind of thing, first of all, it helps with planning. I put it in my calendar as a recurring meeting so no one else can take that time. And even if I started today, even if the next 3 weeks are booked, I still put it in so that it starts 3, 4 weeks from now to have space. But there's also something in your mind that okay, Friday, I'll have the time to sort of think that through. I think it's the same with meetings with staff. When there's a predictability to them, people prepare for them differently than when they're ad hoc.
Yes. Well, and we like ritual,
Yeah,
right? Like we like
exactly.
ritual, we like routine. As much as some people will say, no, I don't like ritual, we do in general like ritual and routine. And so when you put it in your calendar for the same time every week. Now, we've been we've been all over the place. I love this. If you were thinking about an individual, right, and they were looking at their upcoming year, or I sometimes even do it in seasons. I consider
Yeah.
seasons like, oh,
Yeah.
we're in
Yeah.
new season. Let's help individuals think about their goals, their behavior. It may be related to the company. It may be like totally different from a strategic conversation with yourself.
Yeah, I love that strategic. And I also do like strategic, people have retreats. I do retreats with myself and
Sure.
like sort of to do this. And the end of the year for me is a great time. It's sort of in the air, it's in the in the space. Some people write resolutions and I don't think there's anything wrong with them, but I think there's a reason why people struggle with them sometimes is that they're very achievement based and often they're created from a should perspective. Oh, I should lose weight. I should start exercising. I should stop drinking or whatever the shoulds might be for whomever is doing them. So that's really hard to maintain motivation when it's a should. And it's also very accomplishment based and like action based, which can sometimes we can do for a month or so, but it's really hard to maintain that over a course of a year. Some people do it, some people are really good at it. But I think that there's an element of looking at, what would success look like for me at the end of the year? And it's not just what I'm going to accomplish. For me, it's not about what I want to do, or it's not only about what I want to do. There's a doing element, but it's who I want to become. It's who I want to be. So it's like there's an element of doing and an element of being. In the next year, who do I want to be that's different, that's going to serve me and the other goals that I have and how I want to grow as a person? And I think that combination of being and doing is a really interesting thing to look at. And there also, when we have an emotional connection to it, it makes it easier than just, oh, I should really start exercising or whatever it is. So I often look at, for me, what works in the end of the year is looking at a theme for the next year. And the theme is usually really simple. It's sort of a big category. And this is what I'm going to focus on myself for the next year to grow into. And then everything throughout the year is the beginning of the year, it's a little bit forced around actions. Like I'll do these actions related to that. And as the year goes on, I start to become a different person because of it.
Love the idea of who am I becoming as opposed to what is almost broken or wrong with me
Yeah.
that I'm trying to fix.
Yeah.
And it's that whole growth, that whole connection with who we are. As you look forward, Melissa, and you are growing in your leadership as a coach, as a speaker, who do you want to become? Like, what is your strategic vision
Yeah.
for yourself?
That's a great question. I usually start in November looking at the next year. So you know that I have a big passion around social impact.
Yeah.
And so that's just something I work on organizations, how they can stand out to their compared to their peers on social impact side. It helps with retention. It helps with attracting great talent. It helps with their brand in the industry. Like 91% of consumers prefer to buy from an organization that supports good causes, and about 80 something percent of Gen Zs and millennials want to work for an organization like that. So there are a lot of business reasons to do it. So that's a passion of mine to bring that to organizations and to individuals. It helped them step into their own passions around social impact. So for me, it's always about the growth piece that I've been focusing on the last year or two is who do I need to become to have a bigger impact in that space? So who do I need to become as an executive coach? What types of clients do I need to work with that elevate that conversation? Who do I need to be the type of coach for those clients? And then on the personal side, that I've sort of touched on some of the celebrities and people that high wealth individuals who are using their platforms or their resources for social impact. So who do I need to become to be a partner with them? So that's been the focus for me for the last year or two. And that's what I usually sit down by the beginning of the year and say, what needs to shift this year for my visibility, for my behavior, for my impact, for my energy, all of those things in order to be that person that has a bigger impact.
I love that. I love that. If you were coaching me on how to do that as I look into 2025, what type of questions
Yeah,
would you ask me? And
I
feel
love
free
that.
to
Yeah,
pull it up, me and coach me
sure.
directly.
Well,
Yeah.
so there's one that people often start with that I'll start with, but it's not always the one I start with. But I think it's a nice, obvious one. Is what are you passionate about?
Well, as you know that I'm passionate about conversations. And one of the things that I feel is we teach people how to do presentations. We teach people how to read, how to write, but we don't actually teach people how to sit down and do exactly this thing and have a conversation and spark ideas that really transform organizations, that cause teams and people to really move forward. So that's really what I'm passionate about. And I didn't realize that, I would say, until probably the last year. Like, I
Yeah,
knew I wanted to do executive coaching, but really the conversations, like helping people get good at conversations, I think
hence
is
this
really what I'm
podcast, right?
hence this podcast, Engineering Better Conversation.
And what riles you up in the world?
What riles me up in the world? When people I'm trying to think of when people are not willing to listen to each other. And so they get on their high horse and start preaching. Like, I really drives me nuts when I hear people getting into crusading and preaching and looking at politics and that activity. It's like I'm trying to one up each other.
Yeah.
And that just drives me nuts. Like, why can't we just have a conversation, have a good debate? Like, I love really good debate, but not with the intention to one up the other person, with the intention to expand whatever it is both of us are doing.
So if you look at the end of 2026, especially related to what we just talked about, what would
Yeah.
success look like for you?
So success would look like for me, I prefer to coach people one on one. So I would love to be having a full roster of people where I am coaching them one on one, helping them understand the people who are around them, who they potentially struggle with in conversation, so that they can lead better, so that they can have better relationships with people. I think if I had a full slate of people that I was doing that with, that would just bring me a great deal of joy. I can do group coaching. I can do like team building and stuff to that effect. But I really feel if I can sit down and have one-on-one and make those person-to-person impacts, that is like massive for me.
I'm going to ask you another question,
Yeah.
a couple more questions, but I just want to point out to anyone listening, do you see how Nancy has gotten all excited and like focused and really clear on this? This is what happens when you start to get close to what it is that you want to be.
Yeah.
So you talked about impact. So what would be the impact on you? Because I'm hearing like you get excited about it. And what would be the impact on those people if you were doing that by the end of 2026?
Got you. So the impact on me is I think I would get up every day so excited about the conversations. And so I think that's really it. It's like to show up every day excited and energized in the world. So that would be like the impact for me is just to have that sense that I'm like doing something that makes a positive change. I think for those people, often people will be like, Nancy, you need to tie it to them getting promoted or them. And while promotions are nice, I want organizations to be able to think bigger and achieve massive results. Like make, as I was thinking of this podcast, like tectonic shifts in the way their organization works, just because people are able to have really good conversations.
Yeah.
Because I believe it's the basis of success is all of those conversations. And so people would be like excited to go to work. The person who was difficult for them to work with would become less difficult because they know how to have that conversation, how to approach, and that relationship would build in greater success. Like I really think people would just show up going, I love the people that I get to work with, even the ones who challenge me.
It's probably even especially the ones who challenge me. What would you need to do to make that happen by the end of 2026?
So I think really for me, it is sharing this concept of the power of conversations. And it's having conversations with people like you to show how conversations can happen. And it's really me putting great content out there that talks about conversations from those different perspectives. I see the world through very logic and action, and that's only about 30% of the population. But if I can even get that 30% of the population to understand how people respond more emotionally, how they respond with more purpose or value driven or need that space and understand how to create that conversation, then I can actually impact the bigger population. And so really for me, it is creating information that speaks to my logical people who don't generally get emotional intelligence.
So who do you need to be that's different than you are today
Who do I
to
need
be
to
the
be?
right person to do that?
Yeah, I need to be, who do I need to be? I need to be someone who is consistent in showing up in creating this content. I need to be someone who's constantly reaching out, even though I'm quite introverted in that perspective.
So you need to be someone
And
who leans into a little bit more of that extroverted side. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Leans in. Like most people I think I'm extroverted, but the reality is I'm not. And so I really think I need to lean more into it. And I just need to be more consistent in showing up for that process.
Yeah. And so normally I do something like this over about an hour and a half so that you get a little taste of how we did that. But it would be then to create some kind of, it's not to make a plan necessarily because that can feel very burdensome. Some people like it and other people that can control it,
Right.
but that doesn't help. But so I'll give you some examples from my own. I have a couple that I won't share here, but a couple years ago when I was looking to work more with celebrities and high wealth individuals, I needed to get into a different circle of people. And one
Right.
of those ways was speaking. So
Yeah.
I used to be terrified of speaking. I would freeze on stage. My mind would go blank. I had true stage fright. But my theme for that year was raw and real. And the real was spelled REEL.
Got
So
you.
it was about I needing to put myself out there more on video, on stages, on the real side and post on social media, but also be real and be more authentic and be more true and more honest rather than I have a tendency to talk about ideas and I needed to speak more about myself. So that was my theme for the year. And so I just did all kinds of things that year to put myself in situations where I had to be more authentic and on. Not that I wasn't authentic before, but I had to go more raw, I guess is the best way, the raw part. And then to also be more public and visible. And I took speaking program and all kinds of things where I met you. So that started at the beginning of the year with actions. And as it went on, I did almost like I embodied it more.
Nice.
So, and then what I find too is whatever I pick in a given year, I get a full year cycle of that, but I get the best benefits from that a year later, like over the next year. And
Yeah.
every time I've picked different things each year. Sometimes they're a little bit more um, like fun. Other times they're more business specific. Yeah. So it can be different. Like one year I picked year of like stretching into just like, and I started taking hip hop classes and house dancing and different things. So it was just a different kind of theme for the year to step more into some fun and some less seriousness, I guess.
I love that. One of the things that I am actually looking forward to taking this year coming up is I want to take up comedy.
Yes.
And so I'm going to register with Second City and do some improv classes and those types of things, which are really out of my box and my wheelhouse. But I think that will really make me a better speaker,
Yeah.
add more fun and engagement into the work that I do by training in that area.
Well, yeah. And I'm a big believer in always doing things outside my comfort zone. So like the hip hop class, I was like the oldest person in the class. I didn't know how to do it. But I think there's something that is really creative that's generated from stepping into things. And like you said in your example, you're doing it for one reason or another, but it has so many other benefits. And it's going to help with conversations. It's going to help with play. People learn better through play than through serious training. There's just going to be so many benefits from that. And the thing is, when I pick something at the beginning of the year, I never know exactly. When I say what would success look like, it's not necessarily that I know exactly how it's going to end up. It's more the aspirational piece that I'm looking for. And it always ends up slightly different, but I'm never disappointed.
Nice. Nice. I love that. I love that. So, Melissa, is there anything that I missed asking you or that you wanted to share about strategic conversations that we have not covered yet?
Yeah, I think I'm going to go back a little bit to what you asked me before about my own interests. And
Yeah.
I think that organizations and the leaders do have an opportunity to be strategic about social impact in a way that helps them and their firms. As I said before, consumers are wanting to buy that. And we've seen this year. So Target has really struggled when they dropped their DEI initiatives. And at the same time, Costco stayed committed to them. Costco in February, the same month this was all happening, Costco gained an additional 8 million visits because of their commitment to social causes that their competitors were dropping. We see statistics like this over and over again. And my experience is a lot of organizations are doing things. They don't have a strategic approach to it. So doing ad hoc events with United Way, or they support another charity, or they give their staff something to do, but they don't have a cohesive strategy around it. And they can't answer questions about it when they're asked, in particular in interviews, because those Gen Zs and millennials want to work for organizations that are purpose-based. And they feel pride from that. They're attracted to it. And I've worked with an accounting firm that was doing a lot, but they weren't articulating it. And they were losing really good talent because they couldn't talk about it. So people need to think about what's the issue? What are the issues we want to stand for? How is it going to permeate our culture? And how can we speak about it in a way that's meaningful? Because consumers, people, employees, and clients are attracted to authenticity and to things that align with their values. And when companies or leaders aren't speaking about that, they're missing an opportunity. So that's something I'm passionate about, and I love working with people around those things. But I did want to sort of wrap that piece into here.
No, I'm grateful that you did. I am grateful that you did. And so for those of you who have been listening and picking up all of these nuggets from Melissa, I want to share with you a little bit about who Melissa is so that if you are interested in connecting, working with her, having more strategic conversations, you know who to look out for. Melissa Creede helps executives, business owners, and celebrities lead from purpose and create impactful change. With a 30-year career spanning Fortune 50 leaders to vulnerable youth in Uganda, she bridges leadership, heart, and legacy. Melissa is an international best-selling author with her book, Beyond Your Inbox, Intentional Leadership in a Distracted World. She also helps clients design a bold vision for the future and focus on what matters without getting derailed by distraction. And I think you heard a lot of that in today's conversation. Before she became a coach, Melissa was a climate changing clean energy executive known for bringing visionary thinking, and practical strategies to complex global changes. Melissa has worked and played in over 60 countries, including hiking in Nepal, Kenya, and Pakistan, installing solar panels in rural schools in Argentina, and backpacking in Southeast Asia, Europe, and Eastern Africa. And you can also see her canoeing on the Ottawa River anytime. Melissa, it has been such a pleasure to have you on the show today and this engaging conversation about strategic conversations. If people want to reach out and connect to you, where's the one best place for them to get to know you better?
I would say LinkedIn is probably the best. It's just under my name, Melissa Creede. Creede has an E on the end. Reach out, tell me, say hello, and I'll chat with you.
Thank you very much. And all of Melissa's contacts to all of her different locations will be in the show notes below. So please take advantage, connect with her. And thank you very much for being part of engineering a better conversations every day. My goal is to help bring amazing experts like Melissa here. So if you have an idea, strategy, or someone you want to see on this podcast, or maybe it's even you, please drop me your name and I would be glad to host you or this expert on this channel. Cheers and have a great day.